Hey everyone, Doug here, Doug Johnson Productions, Orem, Utah. About a year ago, I released a video talking about different SDI to HDMI converters that are out there, and well, the market's changed quite a bit since I released that video, and so it made some sense to do a follow-up and to talk about the market as it presently exists, what products are out there, what I think, which ones I recommend, and so forth. So this video might actually take a little while because I got 7 products here, and as I mentioned, I'll talk about a couple others as well. But I want to cover some of the pros and cons of each one of these things. Now, I've used every one of these things fairly extensively, so I think I can speak with some authority about the quality of the products and the quirks and what's good and what's bad about them. And so, but just very briefly, very quickly go through these. So for this first one here, it's going to be upside down because of the way the cables happen to lie here on the table. This is the Blackmagic Design SDI to HDMI microconverter. They also have the reverse. It's the HDMI to SDI as well. And then there's several different versions of this guy, but this is one of their mini converters that converts SDI to HDMI. This is the 4K version, and this is actually now a discontinued product. They've replaced it with a newer one. If you look at the label, it's SDI to HDMI 6G instead of 4K. There are some feature changes on that one. I'll go into that. There's also an older one that's now been discontinued, which only does HD. It's just called SDI to HDMI. And there's a bazillion of those things around. You can find those things on eBay for a song at this point. The next one is the Blackmagic Design, again, 12 gig SDI to HDMI converter. So this is one in their Teranex mini series. Obviously, it's a considerably larger form factor, but I'll talk about that one as well. And then I've got 2 products here from Decimator Designs, although these are not the only ones that I have or own, or have or use. We've got the MD-LX there, and then the MD-HX. I also have the MD Cross, which I elected to not remove from its equipment rack, because for purposes of this discussion, it's essentially the same as this one. And then I've got the SC1112 from AVMatrix. Bring that up where you can see it. And then finally, some kind of generic converters. These things are all over Amazon and eBay, and they're pretty cheap. All right, so last time we did this, talked about some issues with the microconverter, and for that reason, because of an issue with the audio, I couldn't make a strong recommendation for the microconverter. It seems at this point that Blackmagic has resolved that issue with the firmware, so the audio on this thing is fine. This thing accepts SDI from standard def all the way up through 1080p at 60 frames per second. It does support 3 gig SDI, both level A and B, and so you can use it with pretty much any equipment that puts out a 3 gig signal. It's powered off of micro HDMI connection, so 5 volts, and it comes with, well, there's 2 versions of it now. That's one of the things that's changed. There's a version that does come with a power supply, and there's a version that doesn't come with a power supply. And the difference in price is about 20 bucks. And so if you've already got an old cell phone power supply lying around, you could probably use it with this. The other thing you can do is, since it's USB based, you could power it from a computer. I'm not sure why you'd necessarily want to do that, but you certainly could. The other very cool use of having a USB port on there, so a lot of modern televisions and projectors and etc. actually have USB ports on them. In a lot of cases, you can use that USB port on the display to power the converter, and so you're not having to deal with a separate converter or whatever there. So the version without a power supply is currently $39, and adding the power supply bumps the price up by about 20 bucks. So just so you're aware, this actually has become a real nice product, and for 39 bucks, I say go for it. You know, if you only need HD, this is a great way to go. So that's the Blackmagic Design micro converter, SDI to HDMI. All right, now stepping up the range a bit. Okay, this one, like I said, as mentioned, is a discontinued product. This is the SDI to HDMI 4K. The replacement product, which is basically a 6G instead of 4K on the name. That's how you can distinguish them. I haven't gotten the 6 gig version yet, mainly because I've got more of these things that I know what to do with at the moment, and they work for me, so I'm not in any hurry to replace them. These accept signals anywhere from standard def all the way up through 4K or Ultra HD, either one, at up to 30 frames per second, and convert it to HDMI. They also have audio outputs. These are balanced audio connections, and you can set which channels are output through those by manipulating the dip switches that are there on the top of it. It'll also output digital audio, AES, EBU, digital audio, through selecting. There's a cheat sheet on the back there telling you how to set the switches in order to make it perform those different functions. The other cool thing here is it has an SDI out, and this one actually does as well. So you can have your SDI signal come in and then loop it through to another device. There's also an alternate SDI input on here. So basically what that means is if your first input goes dead, it automatically fails over to the second input. And so it gives you a little bit of redundancy there. In terms of power, it's powered off of a 12 volt connection, and that's a 5.5 millimeter outside, 2.5 millimeter inside barrel connector. So I use a ton of these things. You look out throughout the trailer, every monitor in the trailer has one of these attached to it, and that's how I'm getting video into these monitors, because they all have HDMI inputs. The 6 gig version of this, which just basically started shipping within the last couple months, adds a couple of cool features. One of which, the most significant of which, I think, is the LUT processing. So you can download a 3D lookup table into the converter, and the converter will apply that to both the HDMI input or output and optionally the SDI output. So there are a lot of uses for that. Their main intended use would be for use on set when a camera is shooting, maybe in log format or raw format or something like that, where the image coming out of the camera on the camera's SDI port is maybe look a little too washed out or whatever. So you can download a LUT into here to make the picture on your connected monitor look a little bit more normal. I do something a little different with that. I actually use, if you've been watching my videos, you know, some of you may know that I created a LUTandMath.com site, and one of the features of that site is camera matching. And so I've actually been using this. I may eventually pick up some of these to replace those, but so I create a LUT which makes one camera match another camera, and so I just have to run it through a converter here that supports the LUT feature. Another feature which they actually did add to this the 4K version of this, and it's in the 6K version, is HDMI sync lock. I don't remember the exact terminology for it, but basically, if you're changing inputs on the device, it will maintain an internal sync, and so, you know, a lot of consumer displays have a hard time resyncing onto a new signal as it's being output via HDMI. And with that sync lock feature, there's an internal sync feature here. So as the video input changes or it gets disconnected and reconnected, it will maintain a constant signal to the connected display. So you don't have to worry about all that time to resync. The downside to that is it does add up to 1 frame of delay on the output. So it's a feature I don't use, but I can see where it would be useful for a lot of different people. All right, so the 6 gig version of this guy is $185. So, and that's available lots of different places. There will be a link down in the description below. This is the older ones, the 4K version. It was $285. It's now discontinued because there's a replacement which actually does more. You can usually pick these things up for pretty cheap on eBay, and the prices of those, I'm sure, will keep coming down. There are still a few people trying to sell it at the older price, but eventually they're going to have to reduce that in order to sell them. All right, so moving on to the next one. This is the Teranex Mini version, 12 gig. So this does 4K up to 60 frames per second. And let's take a look at the back here. We've got the SDI input, loop through output. Again, this has the LUT lookup feature, and so if you do a lookup table, any video on the SDI input It has the LUT applied for the HDMI output, and optionally for the SDI output. As I mentioned, that's how I make some of my cameras actually match. My PTZ cameras will match my other cameras a lot better by using a LUT inside one of these devices. So yeah, video from the camera goes in the input, the LUT gets applied, and then the output of this continues on into my switcher. So it really helps the quality of the video there. This also has balanced audio outputs on XLRs instead of 1/4 inch or TRS. Has an Ethernet port for configuration. That one area where that differs from the others. This one, the configuration is done exclusively through the USB port. Same thing with the microconverter. And this one you can do configuration over a network. This also has power over Ethernet Plus, and that's actually how I normally power this. So power comes from a network switch that it's plugged into instead of having to use the AC power. You can supply power on both, and that way you sort of have redundant power. So if one dies, it'll still continue running. A couple of downsides to this one, though. One, it's expensive. It's about $500, so considerably more expensive than the others. It also runs kind of hot. I mean, not too hot to touch, but it does run warm, and there's a fan inside, and so it's not silent. It does make some noise. You can rack mount these three units to one rack space, and that's actually how I normally have these. So yeah, it's a good product. I wish it was not $500. It doesn't, to me, seem to be worth roughly 3 times what the 6 gig version is, but can't complain too much. So, all right. So yeah, the older SDI to HDMI non-4K version, HD version, has been discontinued. You can usually pick that up for a song. It doesn't have much by the way of conversion features, but it does have the loop out. It does have the alternate input and audio outputs as well. So, you know, varying levels of products based on what your needs are. So these all have worked well for me. I haven't had any significant issues. Some of these mini converters do give up the ghost after a little while. Blackmagic is really good about replacing them though. The warranty on these is 3 years, and so if it's been 3 years since it was purchased, they basically replace it, no questions asked, as long as, you know, no major physical damage or anything like that. But yeah, so I've had a handful of those that need to be replaced. I even had a couple where I picked up on eBay that didn't work, and they replaced them for me. So. All right, moving on to the Decimator Design products. So the first one here is the MD-LX, and this one is, well, both of these products actually, they're bidirectional converters. And so this one not only does conversion from SDI to HDMI, it also does the other direction. So you can take an HDMI signal, convert it to SDI. It also does bidirectional conversion at the same time. So you can have totally unrelated HDMI and SDI inputs that get converted the other direction. So you can be converting both directions at the same time, no problem there. It also has a pretty cool feature where if you only have one of the 2 inputs connected, either HDMI or SDI, that one signal will go to both SDI and HDMI outputs. So sort of like a mini splitter, a mini distribution amplifier. And it's got a couple of LED lights on it, sort of let you know what's going on with the signal. So, you know, if you're trying to troubleshoot, you can tell with the little LEDs what's going on there. This is powered over USB. It does come with a power supply, a wall power supply. You also do the configuration via USB, and so it's not uncommon if you're doing conversion for a computer that you would have the computer connected via USB, and the computer is actually supplying the power to run this. And then if you want to change any of its settings, it does have a few settings. You launch the software on the computer that's connected to, and that setup is done via USB. This product is $99, and I really do like it. I actually use it. I stole it off of the computer behind me. I very often use it to do conversion of signals or video coming out of my Surface Pro that I've got behind me there. So I can send video that would normally just be going to the monitor on the left throughout the trailer, and then because it's effectively doing a loop through, I just loop the output, the HDMI output onto the monitor. So I'm both converting to SDI and looping it through to the connected monitor. So cool product there. It is recommended. Now we step up to the MDHX and also mention the MD Cross, which, because it's very similar. This is a lot more than just a simple converter. There's a lot more going on here. These also do video scaling and frame rate conversion. So you can, for example, input an SDI standard def signal and upconvert it to HD, or take an HD signal that's 720p and convert it to 1080p or 1080i or whatever. It'll basically do any type of conversion from any resolution and frame rate to any other resolution and frame rate for the standard video. It even does conversion between the North American, like the US and European frame rates. So it'll handle 20 frames, 50 frames, 30 frames, 60 frames, as well as 24. It does conversions both directions. In terms of connections, it's got your SDI input, 2 outputs that can either be looped through or mirror the last 2 outputs. You can have up to 4 outputs on this one device. On the other side, there's HDMI in, HDMI out, USB, and then the USB is for configuration, and then power. It'll accept anywhere from 5 to 12 volts. So lots of different power options there. It actually has menus right there on the device, so you can either configure it using the on-screen menus here, or by connecting it with USB to a computer, you can use it, pull up their control panel software, and manipulate the settings there. It has quite a few different settings in there. It does things like remapping audio channels. So if you want to take audio channels 1 and 2 and make a copy to 3 and 4, you can do that. It also does, like I mentioned, scaling and some other things. It does also support 3 gig SDI, both level A and B. If I fail to mention, this does as well. And it'll do conversion. So if you've got a camera that's outputting level B and you need to go into a monitor that only does level A, you can do that. This also does that same conversion as well, just incidentally. Or, in my case, you have a level A camera somewhere that you need to interface with, say, a Blackmagic Design switcher that only likes level B. You can do that conversion there. This is a fantastic product, and it's built like a tank. These things are rock solid. I've got 4. I love them. Use them constantly. Very handy when I need to output a video frame rate that's not supported by a connected device. Like, for example, very often I'll set up a monitor for a client to see what we're shooting, and the monitor that we happen to be using doesn't support 30 frames per second or 24 frames per second. I'll run it through one of these guys and convert it to 60 frames per second so that it can be seen on the monitor. So this device is $295. The MD Cross, which adds test patterns and some other stuff that I don't hardly use, on-screen overlays and that kind of thing. It's $395. Definitely a recommended product. All right, move to the AVMatrix SC1112. This was one of my preferred products for my last video. And the reason is it accepts both level A and B. It was the cheapest of the what I would consider nicer products in the roundup. It also supports power over USB, so you can hook it to a television or a projector or whatever, or supply power to do the conversion. I had one complaint with it though, and that's when there was no video input on the SDI. It would display a test pattern with the AVMatrix logo in it. They have since come up with a firmware update. They reached out to me and let me know that they had done that, and I applied the firmware update, and now when there's no input, it goes to a black screen. So that one reservation I had with it before has been resolved. The price has also dropped on this. When I first reviewed it, it was $79 to $89. It's now $65. I'm sure it's pressure from Blackmagic with their $39 converter has caused them to rethink their pricing on that. It is a nice product. It's worked well for me. Like I say, power over USB, level A and level B. It does have a loop out, so you can daisy chain from one device to the next. without having to have a distribution amplifier. So it is a recommended product. So if you want to get a product that's not Blackmagic Design, this would be my next recommendation. If you'll need one direction conversion. If you need two direction, then that's when you go with the MDLX. All right, now last, talk about these kind of generic products. These things are everywhere. I've seen them range anywhere from price from $25 up to $100. You know, just whatever the vendor can get for it. Accepts 5 to 12 volts input, which means with a conversion cable, you could actually power it over USB. And they come with wall adapters, not with USB cables. No loop-through output. As you notice, there's only one SDI connector on there, HDMI connector on the other side. They're it's kind of one of those you get what you pay for sort of thing. In this day and age, with Blackmagic having their converter at $39, it's really hard for me to recommend these things. Just because you can get something from a reliable brand with a warranty that you know you can trust. And this one only supports, if you're doing 3 gig SDI, it only supports level A. It does not accept a level B signal. So, yeah, there it is. It's not exactly a product that I would necessarily recommend. Last time, there were certain scenarios where I said, yeah, that would be a decent product to get, but with the Blackmagic microconverter now being $39, there isn't really much reason to get one of those. So, in terms of other converters, I've used a few others from a few other brands, but these are the ones that I think are probably the most popular and the ones that are going to be the most likely to be of interest to the viewers here on the channel. All right, there you go. So there's 7 of the more popular converters that are out there, and a little bit my thoughts about each one. I do recommend all of these, with the exception of this kind of generic one. They all work well, and they've proven reliable for me. I haven't had any issues with them. So again, pricing, $39 without a power supply, $59 with, $185 for the new 6 gig version that replaces this one, $500 on this guy, $99, $295, anywhere from $25 to $100, and currently $65 on this guy. Each of these brands actually do have converters to go the other direction. So if you need converters to go from HDMI to SDI, all of these do offer products, and in fact, these 2 products actually are the converters that go the other direction. And with the exception of the AVMatrix and kind of these generic ones, they all have the option to either output level A or level B if you happen to be doing 3 gig SDI conversion or needing 3 gig SDI. At this point, you know, these products work with pretty much anything. So if you have any questions, suggestions, smart remarks, or otherwise, be sure and leave those down in the comments below. I'll try and answer as best I can. I will be, at some point, bringing the 6 gig version of this in for review. Probably won't keep it, but that's going to be in part due to the support that I'm receiving from you guys on Patreon. So if you want to see reviews on products, continual reviews on products, I appreciate a little contribution over on Patreon. All the money that I receive on there goes directly towards reviewing products. It doesn't go into my pocket or into my company. And so we're going to start seeing some of those reviews popping up here before too long. We're currently at $200 a month, which means, guess what? I'll get to bring in one of the 6 gig converters here real soon. So there's a link down there in the description to support us on Patreon. Rewards range from extra behind-the-scenes videos all the way up to one-on-one question and answer with me. So I appreciate your support there. Again, if you have other questions, let me know, and appreciate you watching, and we'll talk to you later.